Good afternoon, people. Today is Heritage Day in South Africa, and I'm at the mall. Just decided to take some fresh air, and it got me thinking. It got me thinking about what is heritage. What is our African heritage? What is our Heritage Day? What does it include? And I'm very sad to say that the African heritage is a threatened heritage. It's a non-existent heritage. It is a heritage that will probably not last if we do not wake up, if we do not wise up, if we don't start understanding the battles that we need to fight. So of late, we've been hearing about Africans talking about the issue of China on the African continent. Everybody's talking about this great threat to Africa, that is China. We've even got people like Professor Lumumba, we've got people like Dr. Sibi talking about this threat called China and the fact that China is going to take some assets from Zambia because of a default in payment. What annoys me is that those in the know understand that this deficit, this inability to pay, and the fact that Zambia is losing its national assets is a nonsense. It is a nonsense because Zambia owes 3 billion to China, but that 3 billion is not due to be paid to China today, but going to be paid to China over the next 20 to 25 years. Zambia has a commitment to service its debt by paying $340 million every single year. Zambia has a GDP and an economy the size of 25 billion, and they can service this debt of $340 million every single year. They have not yet defaulted. The debts that they owe China are long-term debts, and a lot of them are not debts that collateralize their assets in Zambia, but they're actually debts that are going to be collateralized by the revenues that are collected from the projects that Zambia is working on. And people who are on the ground in Zambia, people who are working on projects in Zambia, are saying that the propaganda is being created by Western institutions that have lost bids to the Zambians because they will never meet, that have lost bids to the Chinese because they'll never be able to compete with the Chinese when it comes to cost and when it comes to labor. The Europeans, the American companies continue to lose bids to the Chinese companies, and so now they're creating propaganda. And when they create this propaganda, the African, as usual, does not look for data, does not look for information, but he continues to listen to what it is that the propaganda Western media says. The Western propaganda is even paying our own people to create the misinformation, the fake news. So now we've got doctors and professors speaking on fake news, doctors and professors speaking without having seen any contracts between Zambia and China, doctors and professors speaking without understanding the debt service, how much of a percentage of their GDP needs to go to servicing the debt that is owed to China. Even though there's European debt, these geniuses, these professors, these what I call the administrators of colonialism on our continent will reflect only on Chinese debt, yet Zambia has got a Euro bond. Zambia has got Euro debt. Zambia has got American debt. They've got World Bank debt. They've got IMF debt. You don't talk about that as Africans. But that is not my issue. My issue is the African continues to fight wars with his allies, but continues to love his enemy. China is the country that liberated Zimbabwe. This country that is taking land, this country that is decolonizing faster than most other African countries, was aided by China, by Chinese training, Chinese weapons to be able to have the independence that they have. This Zimbabwe is supposed to be under UN sanctions were it not for the veto of China in the United Nations. The American sanctions of warfare that are on Zimbabwe today would have been turned into UN sanctions if it wasn't for the veto of China and the veto of Russia. And while the Zimbabwean, while the South African, while the Kenyan, and while every African is talking about China, our ally, China, the country that we were trading with for 700 years before the European got here, China, which never tried to colonize any African country. China, in which Zimbabwe built the Mutapa Empire by trading with China. We're going to make it a threat, but we don't realize the threat of the sanctions of war that have been imposed on Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe right now is at war with the United States. Most Zimbabweans do not know that. Zimbabwe right now has had the United States that has declared it a threat to the national security of America, declared it an unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States of America, which brought about what are called national emergency and presidential powers that imposed war on Zimbabwe, imposed economic warfare on Zimbabwe, utilizing an act that is called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and the National Emergency Act, which imposed war on Zimbabwe as a specified nation. Zimbabweans don't know that, but they're going to talk about China as a threat. They're going to talk about Zambia owing China and airports being taken by China, but yet the United States government right now is using economic warfare on Zimbabwe. And if the United States president, after he has already proclaimed this national emergency, decides to put soldiers on Zimbabwean soil, he does not need to announce it to Congress. Zimbabwe is already at war with the United States, and the United States president can put his military in Zimbabwe without pronouncing war, without declaring war through Congress. The Zimbabwean doesn't know this, but he's talking about Zambia. He's talking about fake news of how it is that Zambia's airport is going to disappear, which is a lie. He's busy talking about how Mombasa is going to be lost to the Chinese, which is a lie. He's busy talking about Zambia not being able to service its debt, yet it is servicing its $340 million debt with the Chinese and all of its other creditors. We are busy picking wars and picking news that is fake, without being able to talk about the 18-year-old war that has been in Zimbabwe, destroying the infrastructure, destroying the economy, destroying the culture, destroying the defense mechanisms of that nation. Your nation is at war. You don't know that. South Africans don't know that Zimbabwe is at war and America is at war with Zimbabwe for its resources. People do not know that America is at war with Zimbabwe for its lithium, for its rhodium, for its platinum, for its gold, for the fact that it has got land that is in the hands of the people. You don't know that, but you are busy with negative publicity about China, the same country that made sure that the sanctions were not put as UN sanctions. You are busy on about China, the same country that helped you liberate yourself from the very same people that are taking you to war now. That's how dumb the African is. The African works on emotion. The African works like an animal on instinct. The African doesn't want to inform himself. Even our professors like Mr. Lumumba don't take the time to do their research. They take the time to make China our enemy, but a country in Africa is actually at war. Libya lost its oil. It lost its oil on the watch of people like Lumumba, on the watch of people like Dr. Sibi. They never said anything about America attacking Libya. Today, Zimbabwe is under the same sanctions that Libya was under. Most Zimbabweans don't know that. Most of our politicians don't know that. Most of our bankers, our secret service, do not know the nature of the US sanctions on Zimbabwe. And then you talk about Zambia when you are at war. You talk about Zambia when your own nation is under attack from weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass economic destruction, the weapons that made you migrate, the weapons that are destroying your utilities, the weapons that are destroying your hospitals, the weapons that are destroying your roads. And then you talk about China being an enemy, but your own opposition is in support of these warfare mechanisms. And I'm telling you that they're warfare mechanisms because they were evoked by what are called war and defense mechanisms in the acts that I told you. We are at war. We've been at war for 18 years. I'm kicking myself for not knowing that. The presidential powers that were used by George Bush, the executive orders that were made by George Bush, are weapons of war. They are the same ones that are used on Syria today, same ones that are being used on North Korea, same ones that are being used and were used on Iran, Iraq, and destroyed Libya. Today, America did not struggle to put its soldiers onto Libyan soil. They did not struggle to put their soldiers onto Iraqi soil. They did not struggle to destroy those countries with their militaries and take their oil, because they had already instituted these kind of executive orders that impose war without them declaring war in Congress. I don't know when you will get to understand this as Zimbabweans, because you prefer lies, you prefer fake news, you prefer things that make you emotional rather than facts, rather than truth. You continue to look at Zambia, China as threats. China is a threat to you when you're in war. China is a threat to you when you're at war. China is a threat to you when you are not in your country. China is a threat to you when some of you are prostitutes in foreign countries because of a warfare and a weapon that is attacking you in your own country. How dumb can we be as a people? And if Africans continue to be this dumb, if we continue to listen to Western media, if we continue to listen to our administrators of colonialism, these PhD graduates who are usually in NGOs because they can't get work in proper businesses, you're going to be in trouble, because they get paid to misinform you. They get paid to make you look at threats that are not threats, so that you don't look at real threats. It's time to wake up. It's time to see and understand the sanctions in Zimbabwe. It's time for you as a Zimbabwean to stop talking about debt you don't understand in Zambia and start understanding EO 13-288 or EO 13469. That's what you must understand. Don't just understand Zidera. There are sanctions that are called executive order sanctions, 13288, that are damaging your nation, that are killing your nation, that make no country, no company able to come and invest in your country, that make it difficult for your companies to go and trade in the United States or in Europe, because our European banks and American banks are not allowed to make payments or transfers to Zimbabwean companies, to Zimbabwean businesses. Your minerals board in Zimbabwe, your minerals and marketing corporation cannot take certain minerals to the United States unless you sell it to their middlemen who take it there for you at a discount. You've got to start understanding these things. And this fake intellectualism, these Lemumbas, these, what is the other name, Dr. Sibi, who are misinforming us and giving us fake news about defaults in Zambia, instead of talking about war in Zimbabwe, instead of talking about pending war in South Africa, problematic. The last thing, it's all good for us to complain about these sanctions. The complaining will not help if we're not doing anything about it. The question is, what do you do about sanctions? You start to unite as a people. You become informed. You simplify what you know. You give it to your brothers, to your sister, to your family, to your circle of influence. Make them understand the nation is at war. Make them understand how the war is working. Make them understand how the war is affecting their everyday lives. After that, you start telling yourself that we cannot wait for European investors, we cannot wait for American investors, we cannot wait for these Chinese investors that we're afraid of, so we have to become our own investors. My brother in Nigeria, my brother in Zambia has to become our investor. The African American in America has to become my investor. I have to start marketing my resources, my country, to those people before the one who's taken us to war to control our lithium, the one who's taken us to war to control our rhodium, the one who's taken us to war to control our palladium and our platinum and our chrome, gets the upper hand. Get informed. Stop consuming. Stop buying their goods. Stop buying Nikes. Stop buying everything that makes them great. And start empowering yourself as a nation. Invest in yourself. Get informed. Inform your relatives. Inform your friends, which is what I'm doing right now. A lot of you think I'm crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm informing you. And the day that what happened to Iraq and Libya happens to you, it will be too late to start recognizing what I was saying. It will be too late to understand. But this parasite called America is capable of doing what it did to Libya, because it's already one step away. You're already being declared war on. You're already being hit by weapons. And the next step, if they feel necessary, is to put their soldier on your soil, which is very simple, because AFRICOM is on the African continent, so that every single African capital is just 3 hours away from an AFRICOM attack. Wake up. They will not pronounce an attack on Zimbabwe. They've already declared war on Zimbabwe. They declared it 18 years ago. They can put men on the ground in a second if they wanted to. And no one is telling you this. I am telling you this. Stop worrying about Zambia. Stop worrying about things that don't that are not wars. Stop worrying about fake news and worry about what affects you and your family and your country. And rise up to protect your country. Let's ask these NGOs, why didn't they tell us for 18 years about these EO weapons of mass economic destruction? Why have they not highlighted them? Why has the UN said nothing about them? Why is it that our banks, our politicians have said nothing? And then ask yourself that a leader of the opposition who supports warfare on his nation, what kind of a leader is that?